This guy is in a free fall. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this. I mean, you got to go all the way back to the Jimmy Carter days to get numbers like this, folks. You're not going to believe this, but 64% of the country disapproves of President Joe Biden on this one single issue. And I'm not surprised, but I do question how low he can really go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. It's good to have you here. Just a quick reminder, you can check out my website, trishintel.com. Do make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast on Apple, iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Do make sure that you are subscribed to this channel on YouTube, on Rumble, wherever you get your video. But this is one unbelievable story. 64% of the United States of America voters here disapprove of the president on the border. This is according to Associated Press. Only 35% of Americans approve of Mr. Biden's handling of the southern border. This is down from 43% in April. And I get it. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out, right? You have massive amounts of people pouring into the country, most, one would assume, without the vaccine, and most without the proper paperwork, and yet they're all coming here because Joe Biden thinks that's the humanitarian thing to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think we're all very altruistic. Americans are really lovely people. But even Obama agrees that you need borders, right? We are a nation state. How can you be a country without a border? Anyway, let me get back to the polls, because this is, as I said, pretty shocking. It's according to Associated Press, only 60% of his own party, these are really bad numbers, only 60% of his own party approves of his work on the border issue. 64% of Americans overall disapprove. I don't know where the Democrats go with this. You combine this with the disaster that we've seen. It looks like they're avoiding a shutdown for now. They've managed to sort of stay in business, so to speak, until early December, right? We're going to keep the lights on until early December, so we've got a little bit of an extension, but there's still the threat of default in the works, et cetera, et cetera. You've got mass inflation, which we're going to talk about coming up in just a bit. And you've got a disaster that unfolded in Afghanistan. And now we learn from General Milley and other generals that they communicated to President Biden just how treacherous the situation was. They did tell him, you're going to need to leave at least 2,500 troops there. Did he listen? No. So you combine all these things together, and look, I'm just being a realist, okay? Forget, which side of the aisle I happen to think is right. I'm just being a political realist here. I don't know how the Democrats managed to keep the House in 22. I really don't. I don't know how President Biden will get reelected if this is the course of action, right? I mean, granted, we're only, 8 months in, which means it could be a really bad next 3 years, or he's got an opportunity to change what's happening. I suspect he's not that gifted a politician. I suspect he's not that gifted a leader. I suspect he's probably not that smart. Well, we kind of know that. I mean, you can just look at his law school records and they'll tell you that, right? Which he tries to pretend aren't actually what they are. But the guy finished almost last in his class. He's not that smart. He's not that good of a leader. And he's got a mess of a party right now, with the likes of AOC and others pushing for more and more and more stimulus, turning us into a quasi-socialist style nation without the ability to pay for any of it at all. I mean, it's really Venezuelan-like, if you ask me. So he's definitely got his work cut out for him. Meanwhile, we have learned, thanks to the foreign minister from Panama, who sat down and did an interview with Axios, the political website, she said there are 60,000 migrants, primarily Haitians, coming to the United States of America as we speak. She said she has been trying to sound the alarm. She met with Secretary Mayorkas from Homeland Security. She has met with members of Congress. She is pushing to try and get anybody to do something, because her country's dealing with this. Other neighboring countries, from Colombia to Brazil, they're also dealing with this. And her estimate is that we will have 60,000 migrants in the next few weeks coming to the United States of America. This comes at the same time as the Biden administration made it clear that they are about to end the stay in Mexico policy that was put in place during the Trump administration, and by the way, upheld both by a federal judge and the Supreme Court just in August. So those are two things that really do not bode well, shall we say, for this president in light of the recent polling. I mean, 64% of the country doesn't approve of him, including 60% of his own party. And now you combine in the idea that you're going to have all these migrants making their way to Del Rio, Texas. You've got a real problem on your hands. Okay? And again, I get that we want to help, but there's only so much we're capable of doing. We just can't say, hey, come one, come all, in such an aggressive fashion without any of the proper systems in place to make sure we know who's here, to make sure that they are people that we want here. I mean, what's so wrong with that? What's so wrong with saying, hey, you know, we have a need for X, Y, and Z. We need nurses. We need teachers. We need laborers. There's nothing wrong with it. Every other country in the world does that. So I think we should be hospitable. We should open things up. We should make it systematic and have the right procedures in place. And we should also be a little bit selfish in all this and make sure that we're doing the right thing for our country. And we should make sure that we're getting people that are not going to be dependent on us here. Meanwhile, I just want to ask, how can you say, all right, we're going to put in all these federal mandates and companies are free to fire people if they don't subscribe to the same ideology, if they don't get vaccinated, and yet, we're not asking the same of anybody who's crossing the border. It just speaks to the hypocrisy, and you've got to ask, what the heck is going on? Is it pure incompetency, or is it something else? I'll let you think about that, but meanwhile, I want to turn to the markets because we had the worst September. Well, we've had one of the worst months in a while for these markets, down 4.8% for the month of September, and investors are growing increasingly worried about the month of October, and they're questioning really and truly where the market goes from here. What I would say is we have earnings to look forward to, so that should provide some sense of direction. I don't think they're going to be great. I think they're going to be okay, but I don't think they're going to be great. I think you're going to hear from a lot of companies that inflation indeed is a problem, because it is. Okay, you cannot print this much money and not have it have some kind of effect. I have been pounding the table relentlessly on this since last summer, since the second COVID stimulus in the last administration. I have been pointing out, look, if you print this kind of money, if you give these kind of handouts, it will come with consequences. And sure enough, it has. We have seen this over and over now in all of the numbers, and now multiple companies have come out and they're saying it's taken a bite out of earnings. For goodness sakes, you've even got the dollar store breaking the buck. Dollar Tree, the Dollar Tree store, one of the dollar stores I should say, has announced that they are going to price some items at $1.50. And they're testing this out, and good for them, right? They think it's going to open up a new consumer product area at $1.50. Didn't they used to have the dime store? Whatever happened to the dime store? We're going to say, whatever happened to the dollar store? Thank you, Joe. Listen, you can't print like this. The Federal Reserve should know better. They do know better, but they're doing whatever they can to try and keep things afloat because the economic policy is so miserable and so awful, and so they're doing their part. But you know what? The problem with printing like this is ultimately it comes back to bite you, because when you get inflation, it's hard to curb. And they kept telling us, oh, it's going to be transitory. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be over. And then Jerome Powell, in a hearing just yesterday, is like, oh, yeah, you know, it looks like it's going to go through 2022. You think? Oh, it looks like that transitory inflation is transitioning into 2022. Yeah, because that's how it works. You see, prices are going up for everything. The price to get a product from point A to point B has gone up. The price to make a product has gone up. The price to hire someone to help sell that product has gone up. So all of these things either do, well, they do one of two things. They either take a bite out of profitability, and I think we're seeing some of that right now, and that'll be reflected, we'll see, as we get October earnings reports, but simultaneously, companies have no choice. They have to raise their prices. So they raise their prices, and people can either afford less or maybe their wages go up. Typically, you don't see the wages, however, go up as much as inflation goes up. In fact, real wages right now, I love how the likes of the New York Times is reporting, oh, you know, wages are up. No, 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 guys, they're down 1.2% adjusted for inflation. And if you ever bothered to study economics, you'd know that you have to look at wages adjusted for inflation. So people have less spending power now. And what the government has done over time, whether it's the Federal Reserve, whether it's Congress printing, what they have done is they have eroded the value of the dollar. And so you need to think about this in terms of your investments. I think that October could be interesting. You know, look, I like buying into markets when they go down because I'm a contrarian who wants to seize those opportunities. And I'm looking at it over the long haul, right? Not just as though you need to retire in the next year or 5 years. So to me, when the market goes down, those are opportunities that you want to be looking at. But if you need that money in the near term, you need to be more cautious. And one of the things I look at, regardless, by the way, long-term, short-term, is always gold. And I watch the price of gold very carefully because gold is a portion of my portfolio. And I've always liked it because it's the one thing where I feel like I can hedge out some of these inflationary concerns. I mean, there are a few different ways to do that, but my favorite and the most perhaps obvious and intuitive, I think, is gold, because it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. It has stood the test of time, and it's kept up in terms of its purchasing power. In other words, if you start to see that your dollar is going down, at least if you hold gold, then correspondingly that gold is going to be worth more, and so it's going to help to even out those concerns. And as you put money away for the future, you have to think, okay, if I'm living off of a fixed income, what is this money going to mean for me in the future? Am I going to have enough in the future? And what you save today may not be that relevant tomorrow. And so again, this is where gold comes in to help you spread out that risk and to help ensure that your money will have value in the future. And when I invest in gold, I go to my friends at Legacy Precious Metals. I've told you about them before. They've been in business for more than 40 years. They really know this. They can help you figure out how to do this, because it's not always that easy. I mean, especially if you want physical gold, right? A gold IRA. How do you do that? Well, you call these guys. They've, again, been in business for 40 years. They'll help you out. 1-866-589-0560. Again, that number is 1-866-589-0560. LegacyPMinvestments.com is their website, and they've got a free investing guide, so I encourage you to check it out. LegacyPMinvestments.com. You are welcome to say that Trish sent you. I know them well, and I know that they will take very good care of you, so check that out if you're interested in hedging inflation, which I think you should. Just a quick reminder, everyone, do subscribe to this channel. Do subscribe to this podcast. Go to TrishIntel.com, sign up for my newsletter. Everything is free. I am here with you every single day, and we need to talk about these issues because effectively you've got a government, whether it's the Federal Reserve or whether it's Joe Biden and company, trying to play a game of monopoly with your money, our future. I mean, they really do think that they are like the banker in Monopoly. It's a really irresponsible position, but nonetheless one that they think that they occupy. And as such, they can just keep printing money and it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It does come with consequences. And as I told you, it leads to inflation. In fact, if you look at the value of a dollar today versus 1972, today's dollar is worth 15% of what it was in 1972. That really gets me. So the point is, in purchasing power, you need to make sure that you figure this out, because I'm telling you folks, inflation is here and it is going to get worse. We saw PPI come in last month at 8.3%, an 8.3% increase in prices. Yeah, that gets passed on to someone. Guess who? All of us. And so consumer prices indeed will go up. And then they have the audacity to say that they want to spend another 3.5 trillion. And then they tell you it's really zero. Hey man, it's zero, says Joe Biden. I mean, this is really, you know what? It's really annoying because I called my bank the other day, called up and they said, you have $0 in your account. And I'm like, wait a second, I have 3.5 trillion. I mean, can you imagine if you called up and you're like, I have 3.5 trillion, which, you know, nobody has. But if you had all this money and they said, actually, it's zero. I mean, it's so insulting. And his poll numbers are bad now. Hey, just wait until this one sinks in. Anyway, Nancy Pelosi, of course, as well, echoing these talking points. Listen to her here.
It's not about a dollar amount. The dollar amount, as the president said, is zero. This bill will be paid for. It's about what are the values that we share and how we prioritize them. And that is the place that we will go. I have calmness because I have confidence in our House Democrats.
Yeah, well, I don't have so much calmness right now because I'm just looking at reality. And I'm sorry, but when the dollar store has to break the buck, Dollar Tree, forgive me, it's indicative of something else going on. It really, really, really is. Just a reminder, do make sure that you subscribe to the show, subscribe to the channel, give it a like and a thumbs up. And I will, as always, be right back here with you tomorrow. By the way, if anybody has seen my lovely shirt, I don't know if you can see it that well. We've got all the banners and stuff, but this is a lovely American flag. You can show your patriotism and your support for our network, the TrishIntel.com network, by going online to TrishIntel.com, subscribing to the newsletter, the free newsletter, and shopping in the Live Free or Die store, where you can actually get this t-shirt. Anyway, so good to have you here. I'll be back with you on Monday.